Money is the root of all evil. If you grew up evangelical, you probably grew up hearing that. Or if you grew up like me, in my particular flavor of evangelical that I was brought up in, with parents who were extremely particular about using the entirety of the verse, keeping things in context, etc., you may have grown up hearing the love of money is the root of all evil. And whichever of those you grew up hearing, they kind of carried the same connotation that money was bad and the pursuit of money was bad. And those are good concepts when kept in context and taken into account for what was actually being decried in those verses, which was obscene wealth or wealth through ill-gotten gains or wealth that was accumulated by hurting others rather than what it's used to condemn today, which is just people trying to make a living and live comfortably. I'm your host, Naomi, and this is Mosaic in Progress. Today, we're talking about money because I am not the only person I know, especially female, who was brought up fundamentalist evangelical, who really struggles with money for very specific reasons. So, let's talk about it. As always, check the episode description for content and trigger warnings. Obviously, we're going to be talking about money stuff and sexism in the evangelical community today. I think I was about 15 when I asked my parents to teach me how to budget. I could not wrap my head around it. I couldn't understand the concept of it. I was very confused by it, and I wanted to learn how to do it. Now, I wasn't working at this point. They didn't want us having, like, high school jobs or anything like that, like some parents do, partially because we were girls. But it wasn't a thing that necessarily pertained to my life. It was just a skill that I wanted to have. And my mother told me, well, just don't spend more than you earn. That's all there is to it. Which, looking back, I'm pretty sure the reason that she said that is because she never had to budget. Ever. She married at 21 and was still living with her parents when she married and wasn't having to pay rent or anything like that. Cell phones weren't a thing. Her car expenses were minimal, and it wasn't something that really had to enter into her realm of reality. She got an allowance from my dad for grocery and household expenses. He was the one who made the money, and he was the one who budgeted the money. He would give her an allocation of the money that he made for her to, buy food and things like that. And she had to budget that to a degree, but she didn't have to think about anything else. He paid all the bills. He paid all the debt. He saved whatever. He took care of all of that. And all she had to do was make sure we had food and paper towels and things like that. So as I look back, I thought that she was just dismissing me and didn't want to deal with my question, but I think it was more the fact that she really didn't know how to answer my question. And I begged repeatedly over and over, like, whenever Dad's paying the bills, can I watch him? Can I see, how he sorts it out, how he does it? And they would kind of say, yeah, we'll let you know. And it never happened. And so at 27 years old, when I finally escaped, I had zero clue how to budget. And I struggled so much with severe depression because I couldn't figure out how to do something that had been made out to me to be so simple. And I didn't understand why I couldn't do it, why it was so difficult for me. And it was something that took years for me to overcome the shame of, and something that I honestly still struggle with a little. The shame of that I wasn't perfect at doing something for the first time. And I don't think that it's unique to money, that idea of like, especially neurodivergent people, especially undiagnosed neurodivergent people who grew up in evangelical homes like I did, that feeling that like you have to be good at something immediately is kind of an ADHD sort of default mode. Like you have to be good at it immediately or otherwise it loses its charm. But it's also a way that we were brought up by our parents. Like, why are you not immediately perfect at this? Why are you so stupid? Like, you didn't have the growth period. You didn't have the ability to just like make mistakes without judgment and learn, or be a stupid teenager. You had to be perfect and perfectly behaved at all times, or you were shamed, you were ridiculed, you were lectured, you were beaten. There wasn't a learning period. You weren't allowed a learning period. It was be perfect immediately or else. And that inhibits a lot of your natural ability to feel safe and to take risks, to take calculated risks. Because you learn that as you're growing, you learn that as you're maturing, you learn that as you make mistakes. And not having the freedom to make mistakes inhibits you in your adult life. And that's true of anyone, no matter your upbringing, whether you had a helicopter parent who protected you from the consequences of your actions or refused to allow you to take risks, or if you had an abusive parent who insisted that you be perfect at everything immediately or suffer extreme consequences. If you are not allowed in childhood and adolescence to take risks and to fail, then you don't know how to calculate risks in adulthood. And it's extremely difficult to learn it once your brain has already formed around the idea that you do not have the freedom, the cushion, the ability to fail without extremely dire consequences or unknown consequences. And your adult brain is not equipped to handle that. So translating that back to money, it becomes extremely difficult, if not impossible, to learn to budget on the fly. I was 27 years old, nearing 28, when I finally moved out of my abusive parents' house. I had never budgeted in my entire life, not even as a math exercise. I'd never budgeted. I didn't understand how it worked. And I had X amount of money. I was living on my own in an apartment, so I had my rent. My Wi-Fi was included in the rent. I had water and sewer and electricity and a car payment and car insurance. And some of those things automatically deducted. And I thought I was smart by setting up automatic deductions because then I wouldn't forget them. The problem was that I forgot them in what I needed to subtract out of the paycheck that I was getting. And so I would look at my balance. I've got $500 or however much. I'm like, well, I can buy that thing online, or I can go out to eat, or I can do this or that or whatever, forgetting that in 3 days a bill was going to come out. It's just really hard for me to talk about because I still feel a lot of shame for it. And I feel like I must have been the dumbest person to ever walk the face of the planet. But I'm talking about it because logically, I know I wasn't. I had no idea how to do that. I had never had anyone show me or teach me or witnessed it in action. And some things, a lot of things, you have to experience at least witnessing before you know how to do it. And budgeting seems simple. It seems like a logical, just find the balance in it. But if you've never balanced a checkbook, if you've never had to keep up with expenses, if you've never had to keep up with multiple expenses, and if you spent your entire life thinking that it was never something you would have to do or think about, it's nearly impossible. So there were months where I didn't have enough money to eat because I thought I had enough money. I thought I had more than enough money, and I spent my grocery budget. And that was a big part of what led me to the church that I ended up at, because their Christian Student Center outreach program that they had at the college campus where I was trying to finish my bachelor's degree offered free food like 2 or 3 times a week. And I didn't have money and I didn't have food, so that seemed like a really good deal to me. And they were really welcoming to me. And when they found out that I was having difficulty with that, they would send me home with, leftovers and things like that so that I wouldn't go hungry that week. They seemed like very nice people. And so I started attending the church service too. And they had monthly fellowship dinners and they would send me home with leftovers. And I didn't go hungry a lot because of the people at that church and that student outreach ministry. And when I started opening up to them about, my financial problems and what I was struggling with, they shamed me even more for indulging in little pleasures or being irresponsible, or just not knowing how to do it. I was shamed even further and made to feel like I was stupid, when what I really needed was someone to just teach me how to do it without shame or judgment about what I had been doing. And I vividly remember at one point after I had been raped, a few months after I was raped, the lease on the apartment that I was renting was up for renewal or moving out, and the roommate who I had decided she wanted to move out. We had both talked about not staying there, but I chose to stay there and she moved out. And at the time, I was making more than enough money to be able to make ends meet with the job that I had. I was working home health and I got paid per visit, and I always had more than enough money to be able to cover expenses. And then we lost a lot of patients, And as a result, I lost about $1,000 a month in income, which took me from being comfortable to not being able to make ends meet at all. And I was in a lease that I couldn't get out of. I went to the apartment managers and asked if there was any way that I could get out of my lease, and it was going to cost me about $3,000 to get out. And I was like, I can't even afford to pay my rent. I certainly can't afford $3,000. And the apartment managers were extremely generous and kind, and because I explained the entire situation to them, and they put me in a smaller apartment where the rent was less. It was still honestly more than I could afford, but it was more manageable than what I was in. And there was a point where I literally didn't have the money. I couldn't afford my rent, and I was speaking to one of the ladies in the church, and she was like, go to the church, talk to the elders, talk to the preacher. We literally have a fund that is for that, for helping members of the church. So I did. I explained to them what had happened and that I couldn't afford my rent, and they decided to give me the money and said that the condition for it was that I had to meet with the preacher for budgeting lessons. And he told me to start listening to the Dave Ramsey podcast or radio show, whatever. And he sat me down and had me list out my expenses and proceeded to shame me for everything that was on that list except for rent and food. Every debt that I had accrued, every eating out that had happened. And at this point, I was a single woman. I was still dealing with the trauma of being raped. And he wanted me to not eat out. And it was like, well, don't have a social life. Don't be around people. Just sit at home by yourself. And don't do anything fun. And I remember just feeling like such a indulgent person that I wanted to be around people, because that was, even the people in the church, that was their go-to. No one ever invited me over to their house just to have tea or coffee or anything like that. No one wanted to hang out with me anywhere that didn't require buying something. And it was always, let's go out to eat together or something like that. And I wanted to be around people. I didn't want to be alone. So my options to not be sitting at home by myself all the time were to go out to eat with people, because those were the options I was given. And he shamed me for Starbucks, and even though I literally budgeted for Starbucks. I did. I had a budget line item for Starbucks. I was actually starting to try to budget at that point in my life. And I don't go to Starbucks anymore because they're union busters and they don't support their workers. But at that time, I went to Starbucks a lot. But I made sure that it fit into like my food grocery budget. And he made me feel horrible for having iced coffee, and like it would have made such a big difference. And even if I hadn't had the Starbucks in my budget, I still wouldn't have been able to afford my rent that month. And the thing about shaming someone for whatever it is that it really doesn't do any good to change behavior patterns, because people's behaviors and habits and whatever exist because it's meeting a need for them, whatever that need is. Maybe the need is that they want to dissociate from reality and escape responsibility. But if you don't address the underlying need, the underlying cause for the behavior, all you do by shaming someone is ensure that they do not feel safe to talk to you about whatever it is. That you are not a person who they can talk to, that they can come to and know that they're not going to be judged. So I felt even more alone after the budget meetings, that not only was I struggling financially, I was also stupid. It just reinforced that idea I had in my head that was given to me by my parents that I didn't let go of, that I was stupid and incapable and couldn't do anything right. And the thing about shame in trying to change behavior is that it has the opposite effect on trying to change behavior. Because if you tell yourself that you're stupid and incapable, then your brain believes that. I mean, it's you. It recognizes your voice. Why would you lie to it? And so it decides that it can't do this thing. You said you couldn't do it, so you can't. Sorry, we can't budget. You told me I couldn't. You told me I was stupid. So, I don't know what that means. Numbers, what are those? And there's this saying that shame dies in places where stories are told without judgment. And it's true, and it applies to everything. It's not just talking about horrific, traumatic events or whatever. It's things you did that were honest mistakes. And I look back on my early spending habits, and even sometimes now, and I spent like a teenager who had been given an income, which is an absolutely reasonable way for me to spend money. Someone who was never allowed to have an adolescence and be a stupid teenager. That was my first experience having really my own income. I kind of did working as a CNA through nursing school, but I experienced the same amount of shame and an even lower amount of responsibility. Most teenagers who start making some kind of income, their parents give them a small expense to keep track of, to keep up with, that they're responsible for, to help them learn responsibility and budgeting. My dad refused to let me pay my car insurance. My dad refused to let me pay my phone bill or give him money for my phone bill. I wasn't responsible financially for anything in my own life except my wants. If I decided I wanted a coffee or to go through a fast food drive-thru or whatever, that's what I was responsible for. That's what I had to pay for. He did not allow me the learning experience of responsibility for my own expenses. And so when I finally had my own income and independence, I didn't know what to do with all that money. It's like giving $100 bill to a 5-year-old. It seems infinite because they don't have a concept of how much things cost and how far money goes. And this is honestly Of all the topics that I've covered, this is probably one of the most difficult ones for me to talk about. I have struggled with it a lot, even now, even being married and having to talk to my husband about money. I don't know that I've had a conversation about money with him that has not resulted in me crying. Not that he's said or done anything to cause that. It's just such a sensitive topic for me and still has so much shame around it that it's hard for me to admit that I struggle with it because I feel like I should know. And it's like my mother's voice in the back of my head constantly like, well, you should know this. You should have figured this out by now. You should have learned this by now. And that's not fair. And honestly, it's not fair from her because I remember so many times as a teenager my dad having to transfer money into my mom's account because she miscalculated her budget and was overdrawn. And they had a lot of fights about it. And I think a lot of times people judge in others what they cannot accept in themselves, and I don't think that my mother was an exception to that. But I can be an exception to that. I can be an exception to that for myself. I can be an exception to that for other people, and I can be vulnerable here with you who are gracious enough to tune into my podcast and say, I'm really bad at budgeting. I'm going to change that. Going to change that reality, but I'm also going to change the way that I talk about it. I was never taught how to budget. I had to learn it on my own without help and with very sketchy resources and shame-filled resources. Because if you've ever listened to Dave Ramsey, boy does that man hate people. He does a really good job of pretending like he cares, but my God, does he hate poor people. I am still learning how to do something that should have been taught to me decades ago but was not. Because the people who should have taught me didn't want me to have financial independence. And if I knew how to budget, then the financial abuse that they kept me under and controlled me with would have had no power over me. I am learning, and I can continue to learn, and I can make mistakes, and I can learn from those mistakes. I'm human. I'm not perfect. Mistakes don't mean I'm a bad person, especially mistakes related to money. Money is just energy, and energy is not moral. It doesn't matter how much or how little I spend as long as I do it with gratitude. The universe doesn't care if I buy a dress or have to ask for help or have enough saved for 10 years. It's just energy. Money is just energy. And I can be grateful in all things and gracious in all things, no matter what my income is and no matter how I spend it. I can release all shame around spending. I cannot continue the cycle. I still remember being 11 years old and having enough allowance saved up that I could buy something kind of nice, and seeing this little stuffed dog. It was a Valentine's Day dog, and it looked kind of like a poodle, and it was red, and buying that dog, and my dad lecturing me on the way home saying, this is why you never have money for things, because you spend it on little things like that. I was 11. What did he want me to have money for? An IRA? A car? At any rate, I am allowed, and so are you, to use your money energy for pleasure. You can take the money you earn and use it on things that make you happy. Yes, take care of your responsibilities first. Your rent, your car payment, your car insurance, your electricity, your utilities, your kids, whatever. But if you've got $5 extra and you want an avocado toast or an iced coffee, by God, buy the avocado toast and iced coffee. Millennials have been shamed more than any other generation that I know of in recent history for buying things that make them happy. And we are blamed for our poor economic situation because we like buying things that make us happy, when we are the first generation in a long time to not have the ability to buy the things that make us safe. We are among the first generations that can't buy a home because the economy is so fucked. We can't afford health care because the economy is so fucked, and health care in America is such a fucking nightmare of capitalist greed that people can't even take care of themselves. And we're shamed for avocado toast and iced coffee. It's really hard, especially in this economy, to overcome the shame that comes with a financially abusive upbringing, especially an evangelical financially abusive upbringing, because not only were we controlled financially to the point that we could not have our own freedom, we were also brought up that we were morally obligated to be financially subservient to a man who would give us enough money to meet our needs, the needs of the household, and also tell us how to spend it. It's okay. If what I'm saying is resonating with you and you're going, me too, that sounds like my upbringing, that sounds like my experience. I also felt the same thing. I experienced the same things. I struggled a lot financially. I struggle with shame around it as well. I'm your auntie now, and I'm telling you that it's okay. You don't have to shame yourself anymore. Let that shit go. Those are your abuser's words. And you do not have to give space in your head anymore to their words. Sure, there are intrusive thoughts and there's trauma you have to work through, but you do not have to consciously allow them rent-free space in your head anymore. Especially around that. Money is earth energy. Money is grounded energy. You look in the tarot deck, the pentacles, coins. It's the earth element. Earth represents groundedness. Money is root chakra energy. Money is safety energy. And so when we have this shame around money and shame around being able to spend things on ourselves, we don't even realize it, but we are working with a very primal wound. It's that first step as you're an infant learning safety. Safety and belonging. You can belong to a community. You're safe. Once you realize that that energy with money is the same as that energy with safety, that energy with groundedness and home, it starts to make more sense. Even look at the Bible. You cannot serve God and mammon. What does that mean, mammon? It's devil, right? Mammon means money. Do you know what the devil in the tarot deck represents? A lot of things. Among them, money, materialism, worldly things. We're told that it's evil. We're told we shouldn't seek it. And seeking it can look like pursuing a career. It is absolutely wild to me now to look back and realize how absolutely demonized building a career was. It's funny now in a way because it's just comical to look at how much fundamentalists just want to be persecuted and miserable. It comes from that puritanical way of thinking, that root of like, don't be happy, it's sinful. And it's really hard to get away from that when you're told your entire life that like, if you're doing things because it makes you happy, then you are succumbing to the sin of just placating your own desires and wants and just living for yourself, living selfishly, not thinking of higher things. Because that pervades everything. If you're like, I feel like I would be right in this career, that I'm suited for that, it feels right to me, I enjoy it, well then what are you even doing with your life? Like, you're just doing that because it makes you happy. And honestly, when I first learned of Aleister Crowley, as I left the church, and whatever you think of Crowley, he certainly is not without his flaws, but his idea, do what thou wilt, has been twisted so much. His idea of that was that whatever you are prone to, whatever desires you have, whatever things that you're drawn to that feel right to you, that are what some people would call your calling or your passion or whatever, that you're drawn to those things because that's what the world needs. So do them because that's what the world needs. His idea was not live selfishly. His idea was that your desires are there for a reason. So follow them, pursue them, because there is a need in the world, and that is why you have that desire. That's why you have that passion. That's why you have that pull or feel called to something. So do those things. And he was labeled a hedonist for that, and I don't think calling him a hedonist is too far off base, but his hedonism didn't really involve that philosophy. And it's a weird transition to make from like, don't do things that make you happy because you're, fulfilling that sin of lust or whatever, to maybe I'm drawn to this or I'm passionate about this because that's what I'm here for and that's what I'm supposed to do. And sometimes I think that maybe it's not always that deep. Maybe it's not you have to withstand the sin of lust, or that your passion is your purpose for being here. Maybe it's just that it makes you happy. And it's okay to be happy. It's okay to be comfortable. It's okay to live how you want to live. Not everything has to be that deep. Not everything has to be that weighty. Sometimes you can just let yourself be happy. Sometimes you can just allow yourself to be comfortable without shame. You don't have to shame yourself because you bought the iced coffee or allowed yourself to rest on your day off rather than cleaning the entire house, or didn't spend every free moment reading the Bible or praying or thinking higher thoughts. Sometimes it's okay to just exist in happiness. I hope that this has been helpful for you. I hope you've gained something from this episode. Hope that maybe it helped you release shame that you had for yourself. And I hope you'll join me next week on the podcast as we both continue to work on our mosaic in progress. Please follow us wherever you like to go on social media. We're on Instagram and Facebook as Mosaic in Progress, and wherever you listen to podcasts, you can find us there, Mosaic in Progress. Please follow, share if you feel so inclined, and if you have an idea for an episode topic, please email me at mosaicinprogress@gmail.com.